The Galactic Council had existed for 12,000 years. It watched over 73 different species across the Orion arm of the galaxy. It handled trade agreements, settled disputes, and kept records of every war, every conflict, and every act of piracy that occurred in known space. The archives were vast beyond imagination, containing data from civilizations that had risen and fallen long before most current species learned to walk upright. Ambassador had served the Council for nearly 200 years. Her species, lived long lives and valued patience above all else. She had seen empires crumble. She had watched young species destroy themselves with weapons they did not understand. Very little surprised her anymore. But on this particular morning, sitting in her office high above the Council's capital world, something caught her attention, something that made no sense at all. She had been reviewing security reports as part of her routine duties. Pirate activity, border skirmishes, refugee movements, the usual problems that plagued any large civilization. Her eyes moved across the data without much interest until she noticed a pattern. Or rather, she noticed the absence of a pattern. Humans had joined the Galactic Council 40 years ago. They were a young species by galactic standards, barely out of their home system when they made first contact. Like all young species, they should have been easy targets. Their technology was primitive compared to the elder races. Their military was small. Their colonies were scattered and poorly defended. And yet, according to every record could find, no human ship had ever been successfully raided. No human colony had ever been attacked and looted. No human citizen had ever been taken by slavers. This was impossible. Pulled up more data. She searched through 40 years of records looking for any incident involving human victims. She found nothing. She expanded her search to include attempted attacks, near misses, anything at all. What she found made her sit very still for a long time. There had been attempts, many attempts. Pirate fleets had targeted human cargo ships. Slaver bands had planned raids on human colonies. A rogue military faction from the outer territories had once declared open war on human settlements. None of those groups existed anymore. Not defeated, not imprisoned, not scattered, gone, completely and utterly gone as if they had never existed at all. The only evidence they had ever lived were scattered reports and a handful of survivors who refused to speak about what had happened to them. Felt a chill run through her body. She was not easily frightened, but this was wrong. This was deeply, fundamentally wrong. Young species did not simply make their enemies disappear. Young species struggled and suffered and sometimes died. That was the natural order of things. She contacted the security directorate immediately. The response she received was not helpful. The analysts looked at her data and shrugged. Perhaps humans were lucky, they suggested. Perhaps their territory simply fell outside major pirate routes. Perhaps there were errors in the records. Knew better. She had been doing this work for 2 centuries. She knew what luck looked like, and this was not luck. This was something else entirely. She requested a formal inquiry into human defensive capabilities. The request went through proper channels, as all things did in the Council's bureaucracy, and eventually reached the humans themselves. Commander Daniel Hayes read the inquiry in his office on Earth's orbital station. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and calm eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by diplomatic questions. His second-in-command, Captain, stood beside him as he scrolled through the message. "They're asking about our defenses," he said. Nodded slowly. They noticed. Took them 40 years. We knew someone would eventually. Daniel leaned back in his chair and thought carefully about his response. The truth was not something he could share. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. The galaxy was not ready for the truth, and honestly, most humans were not ready for it either. Only a small number of people knew what really protected humanity, and they intended to keep it that way. He typed a response. It was polite, professional, and utterly meaningless. Standard security protocols, he wrote, enhanced early warning systems, effective deterrent strategies, the kind of vague language that said nothing while sounding impressive. He sent the message and turned to, "That won't satisfy them." "No," she agreed, "it won't." Received the response and felt her frustration grow. She had dealt with evasive governments before. She knew when someone was hiding something. The humans were hiding something enormous, and she intended to find out what it was. She began her own investigation. If the humans would not tell her the truth, she would find it herself. Her first step was to locate survivors. Somewhere out there, people who had attacked humans and lived to tell about it must exist. The records suggested that whenever a group targeted humanity, at least one person was always left alive. One person who could spread the warning to others. She found the first survivor on a remote trading station in the outer systems. An old merchant named, who had once been a feared pirate captain. His fleet had been called the Crimson Talons, and they had terrorized shipping lanes for decades. Then they had attacked a human colony, and everything changed. Traveled to meet him in person. She found him living in a small room above a cargo bay, drinking cheap alcohol and staring at nothing. When she asked him about the humans, his hands began to shake. "I will tell you," he said after a long silence, "but you will wish I had not." Sat down across from him and waited. Whatever truth the old pirate held, she needed to hear it. The safety of the entire council might depend on understanding what the humans really were. Took a deep breath and began to speak. And as listened, she felt the comfortable certainty of her long life begin to crack and crumble away. The galaxy was not what she thought it was, and humans were not what anyone thought they were. Hands would not stop shaking. He gripped his drink tightly, but the liquid still trembled in the glass, watched him with growing unease. This was a creature who had once commanded a fleet of warships, who had burned stations and killed thousands without mercy. Now he looked like a frightened child. "It was 32 years ago," he began. "We found a human mining colony on a small moon. 7B, they called it. Maybe 200 people living there. Miners, engineers, their families. Easy targets, we thought. They had valuable ore and their defenses looked weak. We had 8 ships and 500 fighters. We thought it would take less than an hour." He paused and drank deeply from his glass. His eyes were distant, seeing something that was not in the room with them. "We dropped out of hyperspace and moved toward the colony. Everything was normal at first. Their distress signals went out just like always. We laughed about it. No help would arrive in time. We had done this 100 times before." Leaned forward slightly. "What happened?" "Our weapons stopped working, all of them. Every ship, every fighter, every handheld weapon. They simply went dead. We thought it was some kind of jamming technology, so we tried to leave. That was when the power went out." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "We were floating in the dark. No engines. No life support except emergency backup. No communications, just silence. And then something came aboard my ship." "What was it?" "I do not know. I never saw it clearly. None of us did. It moved through the darkness like it was part of the darkness. We heard screams from other decks. One by one, my crew went silent. I hid in a storage compartment like a coward. I could hear it moving through the corridors, hunting." Tears were running down the old pirate's face now. He did not seem to notice them. "I passed out eventually. When I woke up, I was in an escape pod, alone. Everyone else was gone. 500 of my people just gone. And there was a message on the navigation computer. 4 words, 'Tell others.'" Sat back in her chair. Her mind was racing, trying to find rational explanations for what she had heard. Advanced technology, perhaps, some kind of psychological weapon, but something about Story felt wrong. It felt like something beyond technology, something older. "Did anyone else survive?" she asked. "One person from each ship, always one. Never more, never less. We all woke up in escape pods with the same message. Most of us never spoke of it. The ones who did were called crazy, but we know what we saw, we know what we felt. Thanked him and left. Her investigation was only beginning. Over the following weeks, she tracked down more survivors. Each one told a different story, but all of them shared the same core elements. They had attacked humans. Their weapons had failed. Something had come for them in the darkness, and one person had been left alive to spread the warning. A warlord told her about his raiding party that had targeted a human transport ship. He said the stars themselves seemed to move against them, pulling his vessels apart with invisible hands. A merchant captain from the dry worlds described how her crew had turned on each other in sudden madness, killing there before taking their own lives. She alone had been spared, waking up surrounded by bodies with no memory of what had happened. The most disturbing account came from a young soldier who had served in the rogue military faction that declared war on humanity. His unit had been part of a ground assault on a human farming settlement. He described walking through empty fields under a peaceful sky when reality itself seemed to crack open. The air turned thick, he said. Like breathing water, the ground moved under our feet. Some of my friends just fell apart, not killed, fell apart like their bodies forgot how to stay together. I ran. I ran until I found a cave and hid there for 3 days. When I came out, there was nothing left. No bodies, no equipment, no evidence that we had ever been there, just empty fields and a peaceful sky. He had spent 10 years in a mental health facility before anyone believed he was sane. Compiled all of these accounts and looked for patterns. The attack spanned 40 years and covered every region of human space. The methods of destruction were never the same twice. Some attackers faced technological failure, others faced psychological horror, and still others faced events that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics. The only consistent elements were the total destruction of the attacking force, the survival of exactly one witness, and the message, "Tell others." Someone or something was protecting humanity. It was powerful beyond anything in the Council's records, and it wanted the galaxy to know that humans were not to be touched. Knew she needed to confront the humans directly. Vague diplomatic responses would not be enough anymore. She needed answers. She drafted a formal request for a meeting with human leadership. She made it clear that she knew something unusual was happening. She made it clear that she would not stop investigating until she understood the truth. The response came within a day. It was not what she expected. Commander Daniel Hayes invited her to visit a classified human installation. He offered complete transparency about human defensive capabilities. There was only one condition. She had to travel to the installation in person, and she had to bring only a small delegation of observers. The location would remain secret until they arrived. Accepted immediately. She chose 3 trusted colleagues to accompany her and prepared for the journey. On the night before her departure, she stood on her balcony and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, something was watching, something that had destroyed fleets and armies and anyone who threatened humanity, something that left warnings written in blood and madness. She did not know if she was brave or foolish to seek it out. Perhaps both, but she had dedicated her life to understanding the galaxy and protecting the Council. If there was a power out there that could threaten everything they had built, she needed to know about it. She went to bed and dreamed of darkness moving through corridors. She dreamed of stars that shifted like eyes. She dreamed of a voice that was not a voice, whispering words she could not understand. When she woke, she told herself it was just anxiety about the journey ahead, but deep down she knew better. Something had noticed her investigation. Something was waiting for her. She went to meet it anyway. The ship was called the Endeavor, and its captain was a man named Cole. He was younger than expected, with dark hair and an easy smile that seemed genuine. He welcomed the Council delegation aboard with warm handshakes and offered them comfortable quarters for the journey ahead. "How long will the trip take?" asked. "About 3 weeks," replied. We will be traveling beyond map space into a region we call the Quiet. I hope you brought something to read." 3 weeks was a long time, had traveled far in her 2 centuries of life, but she had never ventured beyond the edges of known territory. The maps ended for a reason. The space beyond was empty, unmapped, and possibly dangerous. She settled into her quarters and tried to prepare herself for whatever was coming. The first few days of the journey were uneventful. The Endeavour was a comfortable ship, and its crew was friendly and professional. They answered questions about their lives and their work with easy openness. They talked about their families back on Earth, their hobbies, their favorite foods. In many ways, they seemed like any other young species, curious and optimistic and eager to explore the universe. But whenever asked about their defensive capabilities, the conversations changed. Smiles remained in place, but eyes became careful. Words became vague. Everyone seemed to have the same answer: "You will understand when we arrive." Lieutenant Amy Tran was the ship's communications officer. She was a small woman with bright eyes and a quick laugh. Found herself spending time with her in the observation lounge, watching the stars slide past. "Can you tell me anything about where we are going?" asked one evening. Amy considered the question for a moment. "I can tell you that you will be safe. Whatever happens, whatever you see, you will not be harmed. The captain promised you transparency, and you will have it. But some things are difficult to explain with words. Some things need to be seen." "Have you seen it? Whatever protects your people?" Amy's smile softened into something more complicated. "In a way, yes. We all have, even if we do not realize it. She has always been with us." "She?" Amy looked out at the stars. "We call her Grace. It is the closest word we have for what she is." It was the first real answer had received. She wanted to ask more, but Amy gently changed the subject, and the moment passed. The days continued. They crossed the boundary of map space and entered the Quiet. The name was appropriate. There were no signals here, no signs of life, no evidence that anyone had ever traveled through this region before, just empty darkness and distant stars. Notice that the human crew became more serious as they traveled deeper into the Quiet. They still smiled and joked, but there was something else underneath. Respect, perhaps, or reverence, like pilgrims approaching a holy place. On the 18th day, they arrived. The station hung in the shadow of a dying star. It was massive, larger than any structure had ever seen. Its architecture was strange and beautiful, covered in symbols that seemed to shift when she looked at them directly. Her instruments told her the station was old, impossibly old. It predated the Galactic Council. It predated the rise of It predated recorded history itself. "What is this place?" she whispered. Captain stood beside her on the bridge. "We call it the Sanctuary. It has been waiting here for a very long time." "Waiting for what?" "For us to find it, for us to remember." They docked with the station and the delegation disembarked. A man was waiting for them in the landing bay. He was older than the others, with weathered skin and white hair cut short. But his eyes were young, sharp and clear, and filled with something that looked like ancient sadness. "I am Admiral Ben," he said. "Welcome to the Sanctuary. Thank you for coming." Stepped forward. "I have many questions, Admiral." "I know. I will answer all of them, but first I need to give you a choice." He looked at each member of the delegation in turn. "You can learn the truth about humanity and what protects us. We will hide nothing from you, but some truths cannot be unlearned. Some knowledge changes you forever. Once you know what we know, you cannot go back to the way things were before." One of his colleagues, a young analyst named, shifted nervously. "What kind of truth are we talking about?" "The kind that rewrites everything you believe about the universe," the Admiral replied. "The kind that makes you see your own history, your own existence in a completely different light. I am not trying to frighten you. I am trying to be honest. Some of the humans who learned this truth spent years struggling to accept it. Some never fully did." thought about the survivors she had interviewed, the shaking hands, the haunted eyes, the nightmares that never went away. Those people had seen only a small piece of the truth, and it had broken them. What would the full truth do to her? She looked at her colleagues, was pale but determined. The other two observers, experienced diplomats who had seen much in their careers, nodded slowly. "We accept the risk," said. "We came here for answers, and we will not leave without them." Admiral studied her face for a long moment. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him. "Very well," he said, "follow me." He turned and walked deeper into the station. The corridors were lined with symbols that seemed to glow faintly, casting soft light on walls that looked grown rather than built. The air was warm and smelled faintly sweet, like flowers blooming in spring. Felt a presence around her, not threatening, not hostile, but undeniably there. Something vast and patient and incredibly old, watching them as they walked through its home. "She knows we are here," the Admiral said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "She always knows." They stopped before a massive door that reached from floor to ceiling. It was covered in symbols that almost recognized, like words from a language she had once known and forgotten. "Behind this door is the truth about humanity," Admiral said. "Behind this door is grace." He placed his hand on the surface, and the door began to open. Light spilled out, warm and golden, and felt her heart racing as she stepped forward to meet whatever waited on the other side. The chamber beyond the door was vast beyond understanding. Eyes told her she was looking at a room, but her mind struggled to accept what it was seeing. The walls seemed to stretch away forever. The ceiling might have been a sky. And in the center of it all, something existed that should not have been possible. It was made of light and shadow, woven together in patterns that shifted constantly. It had no shape she could name, no form that stayed still long enough to describe. It was larger than the room that contained it, which made no sense at all. It folded through space in ways that hurt to look at directly. But it was not frightening. That was the strangest part. Despite its impossible nature, despite its overwhelming presence, felt no fear. She felt warmth. She felt safety. She felt like a child coming home after a long journey. "This is Grace," Admiral said softly. "She has been protecting humanity since before we remembered how to make fire." Could not speak. She could only stare at the being before her, trying to understand what she was seeing. Her colleagues stood frozen beside her, equally overwhelmed. The Admiral led them to a small platform at the edge of the chamber. From there, they could see Grace without being too close, without being overwhelmed by her presence. "I need to tell you a story," the Admiral said. "The true story of humanity. It is not the story we tell ourselves. It is not the story anyone in the galaxy knows, but it is the truth." He sat down on the platform, and the others followed. Grace continued to shift and glow behind him, a constant reminder that everything was about to change. 200,000 years ago, the Admiral began, humanity was a spacefaring species. We had ships that could cross the galaxy in days. We had weapons that could destroy stars. We built empires that spanned thousands of worlds. We were powerful beyond anything that exists in the galaxy today. Found her voice. "That is impossible. Your species only developed space travel in the last few centuries." "We developed it again," the Admiral corrected her. "We had to start over, because 200,000 years ago we nearly destroyed everything." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Ancient humanity was brilliant, but we were also cruel. We conquered other species and enslaved them. We stripped planets of their resources and left them dead. We fought wars among ourselves that killed billions. We created weapons so terrible that we were afraid to use them, and then we used them anyway." The light from Grace seemed to dim slightly, as if the being was remembering those dark times along with them. "Eventually, a coalition of ancient species rose against us. They were older than us, wiser than us, and they had technologies we could not match. The war lasted only a few years. When it ended, humanity was defeated completely. "What happened to the ancient humans?" asked. "The coalition did not destroy us. That would have been easier, perhaps, but they believed in justice, not revenge. They stripped us of everything, our technology, our memories, our history. They sent us back to Earth, reduced us to primitive creatures who remembered nothing of what we had been. They hoped we would evolve again. They hoped we would become better." The Admiral stood up and walked closer to Grace. The being seemed to respond to his presence, its patterns shifting into something that might have been affection. "But the coalition also knew that we would be vulnerable, helpless children in a dangerous universe, so they created Grace. They built her from technologies we cannot understand, using principles that might as well be magic to us. They gave her one purpose: protect humanity until we could protect ourselves, watch over us, guide us, and destroy anyone who tried to harm us before we were ready." Looked at Grace with new understanding. The being was not just powerful. It was a guardian, created specifically to keep humanity safe. Every ship that had tried to attack humans, every pirate fleet, every invading army had faced this entity. This ancient protector that loved humanity like a mother loves her children. "She has been with us through everything," the Admiral continued. "She watched us learn to make tools again. She watched us build our first cities. She watched us fight our wars and make our mistakes and slowly, painfully, grow into something better than we were before. She never interferes with our choices. She lets us succeed or fail on our own, but she does not let anyone else hurt us." "The survivors," said. "The ones left alive after every attack, that was her doing." "Yes, Grace believes in warnings. She believes that intelligent beings deserve the chance to learn from their mistakes, so she always leaves one witness, one person to tell others what happens when you attack humanity. Most listen to the warnings. The ones who do not, well, they learn the hard way." The young analyst stepped forward. "Does Grace communicate with you? Can she speak?" "Not in words, but those of us who have spent time with her learn to understand her in other ways. She communicates through feelings, through impressions, through dreams. She has been part of human culture since the beginning, even when we did not know she existed. Every story about guardian angels, every myth about protective spirits, every feeling of safety in the darkness, that was Grace. That has always been Grace." Felt tears on her face. She did not know when she had started crying. The weight of what she was learning pressed down on her like a physical force. Humanity was not a young species stumbling through the galaxy. Humanity was an ancient species, given a second chance by powers beyond understanding, protected by a being that had loved them for 200,000 years. She looked at Grace, and for just a moment she felt the being looking back at her. There was no judgment in that gaze, no anger about her investigation or her questions, only patience and understanding, and something that might have been welcome. "Now you know," Admiral said. "Now you understand why humans are never targeted, not because of our weapons or our technology or our strategies, because Grace will not allow it. She will never allow it. As long as she exists, humanity is protected." Wiped her eyes and tried to compose herself. She had come here looking for answers, and she had found them. But the Admiral was right. This knowledge changed everything. She could never look at the universe the same way again. "What do you want me to do with this information?" she asked. The Admiral smiled sadly. "That is your choice to make. We have hidden this truth for 40 years because we did not think the galaxy was ready. Perhaps you will prove us wrong. Perhaps you will find a way to share this that does not cause panic or fear, or perhaps you will decide that some secrets should remain secrets." He turned back to Grace, and the being seemed to brighten in response. "Whatever you decide, know this. Grace means no harm to anyone except those who threaten her children. The galaxy has nothing to fear from humanity, as long as humanity has nothing to fear from the galaxy." Nodded slowly. She had much to think about, but first she had one more question. "Can I speak to her, to Grace?" The Admiral looked at her with surprise, then smiled. "You can try. She listens to everyone. Whether she answers is up to her." Stepped forward toward the impossible being that had protected humanity for longer than civilization had existed. She did not know what she would say, but she knew she had to try, stood before Grace for a long time. She did not speak out loud. Words seemed too small, too limited for what she wanted to express. Instead, she simply opened her mind and let herself feel. She thought about the survivors she had interviewed, the terror they had experienced, the nightmares that still haunted them. She had come here expecting to find a weapon, something cruel and destructive that humanity used to eliminate its enemies. Instead, she found a mother protecting her children. Grace shifted and felt something touch her mind. It was gentle, like a warm breeze on a summer day. Images flowed through her thoughts. She saw ancient humanity in its glory and its horror. She saw the wars that had galaxies. She saw the moment of defeat when everything was taken away and the survivors were sent back to their birth world with empty minds. Then she saw something else. She saw Grace watching over primitive humans as they huddled around fires in the darkness. She saw Grace guiding lost hunters back to their tribes. She saw Grace standing invisible beside children as they took their first steps. 200,000 years of patient, endless love. Understood then. Grace was not a weapon. Grace was not a threat. Grace was simply doing what she had been created to do, what she had been doing since before recorded history began, protecting her family, keeping them safe, giving them the chance to become something better than they had been. The connection faded and stepped back. Tears were flowing freely down her face now, but she did not try to stop them. Some moments deserved tears. "Thank you," she whispered. She did not know if Grace understood her words, but she hoped the being understood her feelings. The journey back to Council Space took another 3 weeks. Spent most of that time thinking. She wrote a report, then deleted it. She wrote another report, then deleted that one too. How could she explain what she had seen? How could she put into words something that existed beyond words? Her colleagues were equally affected. Spent hours staring at nothing, trying to process what they had experienced. The other observers talked quietly among themselves, debating what should be done with the knowledge they now carried. By the time they reached home, had made her decision. She requested a private meeting with the council's senior leadership. No records, no witnesses, just her and the 6 beings who guided the fate of 73 species. They met in a secure chamber deep beneath the council building. The leaders looked at her with curiosity and some concern. They had never seen so serious, so careful with her words. "I have completed my investigation into human defensive capabilities," she said. "I have learned the truth about why they are never successfully attacked." "Tell us," said the council's first speaker, an ancient being whose species had been among the founding members of the council. Chose her words carefully. "Humanity is protected by a force beyond our understanding. Any species that attacks them will be destroyed completely. This is not a choice humans make. It is simply a fact of the universe, like gravity or the speed of light. They cannot stop it any more than they can stop stars from burning." The leaders exchanged glances. "What kind of force?" one of them asked. "Something old, something powerful, something that has existed for far longer than the council." Paused. "I cannot tell you more than that, not because I do not trust you, but because some knowledge is dangerous. Some truths are best left mysterious. You are asking us to accept this without proof. I am asking you to accept that I have seen the proof and believe it completely. I am asking you to trust my judgment, as you have trusted it for 200 years. And I am asking you to spread a simple warning to every species in the galaxy. Leave humanity alone. Those who do not will suffer consequences beyond imagination." The discussion lasted hours. There were arguments, doubts, demands for more information. But in the end, the council accepted its recommendation. She had never lied to them. She had never failed them. If she said humanity was protected by something beyond understanding, they believed her. The warning went out through unofficial channels. Quiet messages passed from government to government, from captain to captain, from parent to child. Do not attack the humans. Do not raid their ships. Do not threaten their colonies. The consequences are not worth any possible gain. Within a year, human space was the safest region in the galaxy. Ships from every species passed through without incident. Trade flourished. Cooperation grew. Humanity took its place as a valued member of the galactic community, respected not for what they could do, but for what stood beside them. And life went on. On Earth, on a warm evening in late summer, a young girl named Sophie Brooks sat on her grandmother's porch. She was 8 years old, with bright eyes and a missing front tooth. The stars were coming out one by one, and she watched them with wonder. Her grandmother was inside, preparing dinner. Sophie was alone with the night sky and the sound of crickets and the soft smell of flowers from the garden. She felt a warmth beside her, not physical warmth exactly, more like the feeling of being hugged without anyone touching her, the feeling of being safe, the feeling of being loved. She had felt this presence her whole life, when she was scared during thunderstorms, when she woke from nightmares, when she wandered too far from home and needed to find her way back. Something was always with her, watching over her, keeping her safe. She did not know what it was. She did not need to know. It was simply part of her life, like the sun and the moon and the stars above. "Hello," she said softly, waving at the sky. Somewhere far away, beyond the edge of mapped space, in a station hidden in the shadow of a dying star, something ancient and impossibly tender noticed the small gesture. Grace did not have hands, did not have a body in any normal sense of the word. But she felt the child's greeting, felt the simple trust and love behind it. And somehow, in ways that existed beyond physical reality, she waved back. Humanity slept peacefully that night, as they had for 200,000 nights before. They did not know about the ancient horrors their ancestors had committed. They did not know about the punishment that had erased their history. They did not know about the being that watched over them every moment of every day. They only knew, in some deep and wordless part of themselves, that they were safe, that they were loved, that something powerful and patient and infinitely kind would always be there when they needed it. Grace had made a promise long ago, a promise to protect her children until they could protect themselves. And Grace always kept her promises. The stars turned slowly overhead. The galaxy continued its ancient dance. And somewhere in the darkness between worlds, a guardian watched and waited and loved without limit or end. This was the truth about humanity. This was why they were never targeted. And this was why they never would be.